Cool. Right, so I'm going to just begin now. Thank you everyone for joining this evening, and welcome to the first of our winter roadshows for 2025 and 26. It's a pleasure to be doing these again with you all, and I hope that, as the weather's starting to get a bit darker and a bit colder, we're able to provide you all with some much needed travel escapism and a bit of inspiration as well. So between now and March, we'll be hosting 13 more online talks covering a wealth of destinations from alpine botany to safaris in sub-Saharan Africa to the wonders of the polar expedition cruises and exciting conservation updates, both local and abroad. We also will have our in-person roadshows kicking off in November, and a full list of these with the destinations as well as our online talks can be found on our website. So just a small introduction here. My name's George, and I work at Naturetrek here as an operations manager. Essentially, my job is to put together new and exciting wildlife destinations for all of you to hopefully enjoy. I look after a wealth of countries and taxonomy, but my training was in marine biology, which is why it's an absolute pleasure today to be hosting this talk tonight with Marcus, who will without a doubt be leaving you feeling a little bit inspired about our world's oceans and the giants that live within them. So a bit on Marcus, he is one of our Naturetrek tour leaders and has been leading trips for us for well over a decade now. Some of his previous travel destinations include Iceland, the Gambia, France, the Azores and Mexico, as well as our whale watching trips to Monterey Bay and our upcoming Baja, California cruise. As we go through, please feel free to ask any questions in the chat box and we'll try and answer all of these throughout the presentation as well as the end. And now, without any further ado, over to you, Marcus.
Oh, thank you, George. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Noswaith from Wales. That's Welsh for good evening. Lovely to be here. Thrilled to be working with George. Always a pleasure to work with him. Nice to have some youthful enthusiasm in the company. Old stagers like me, we maintain our enthusiasm, but perhaps haven't got the energy levels of people like George. Yeah, nice to be here with you, George, and thanks for the welcome and for the introduction. I've been leading for Naturetrek for 14 years now. Been all over the world. I feel very privileged and very lucky to be in this position. But I started out life with a primary interest in birds, moved on to before I was working for Naturetrek, quickly moved on to butterflies and dragonflies and always loved mammals. I think everyone does, regardless of what their primary interest is. But cetaceans came to me, I caught the bug maybe 10 years ago, and I have looked to do as many whale watching tours as I can in different parts of the world. And I think I was just listening to what George was saying about the range of holidays that we do. And it is wonderfully exciting to think about all the different destinations and all the different types of animals and plants that you can see. But for me, and looking at the image on the screen at the moment, I don't think there's anything as exciting, as energizing, and as awe-inspiring as being close up and personal with these fantastic animals, not just the size, but the extraordinary behaviors, and a genuine sense of awe and wonder when you are so close to such an incredible animal. So I wish I'd taken this photo. I didn't. It's a wonderful photo. All the other photos are photos that have been taken on tours with Naturetrek, mostly by me, but not always, sometimes by some of our group members. And I've done that deliberately because I want to give you a flavour of the tours and the whales as we see them on tour. It'll be easy enough to filter through lots of images from dive trips and so on, but the images you're going to see are the images that we've recorded while we're out there in the field with Naturetrek. So I think that's kind of worth saying. And yeah, and one of the glories of particularly Monterey is that you do get some great opportunities to take photographs as well as just to enjoy the experience of being so close to a range of cetaceans. I'm going to start. My background is in teaching, and those that have been on tours with me, and I'm sure, I hope there's a few of you in the audience, will know that I was a teacher and head teacher for a long time, and I still teach. In fact, I'm going to school to teach tomorrow, but I'm semi-retired, and I'm going to start off with a slightly school teachery section. I will keep it brief and try to make it as interesting as I can, but I thought it was worth going through a bit of the background and some of the taxonomy behind cetaceans, so that we can understand better which animals we're seeing and how they're related to each other and how they've adapted to their environment. So I'll try and make it hopefully it's not too dry. So, humpback whale. This was taken in Monterey with my lens set on the shortest possible setting. So we do get some incredibly close encounters, I'm glad to say. And humpbacks are far and away the main sort of target species for our Monterey trips. And that was taken with my lens set at 100mm. So not really much equivalent to having your phone on 2x magnification. So they really do come very, very close to the boat. So what is a whale? Well, whales belong to the order Cyrtartiodactyla, which is a bit of a mouthful, which includes other animals which are not marine. Technically, the even-toed ungulates, things like giraffes and hippos, belong to the same order as the cetaceans. But all of the whales, dolphins, porpoises, all belong to the suborder Cetacea. And it's this, so they are referred to collectively as cetaceans. And the cetaceans themselves are split into two families, the Mysticeti and the Odonticeti. But from now on, I'll refer to them as baleen whales, that's the Mysticeti, and toothed whales, the Odonticeti, because those names are a bit of a mouthful, if you'll forgive the pun. And of course, in terms of their adaptations, particularly for feeding, these are two very distinct groups. They all belong to Cetacea, but they're very different in their biology and in the way in which they're adapted to surviving in the open ocean. And this I found on the web, and a really useful reference for the two families. So on the left, you have the baleen whales. So the baleen whales are facing right, and the toothed whales are facing left. And it's immediately obvious that all of the dolphin species are included in the toothed whales. Technically, dolphins are small toothed whales. And you can see some of the other really iconic species there. Sperm whale at the top. You've got narwhal underneath, and beluga, and then killer whale or orca, and so on. On the other side, they're very different in terms of their biology, very different and quite different looking, as you can see on this screen. The baleen whales, the blue whale, the biggest animal, not just on Earth, but that's ever lived on Earth. Immediately below that, not much smaller, the fin whale, then the sei whale, and so on, all the way down to the right whales at the bottom. So it gives you a good idea of, this is every species of whale, give or take a couple of taxonomic debates about, as ever, as with all other things, there are often species being split, species being lumped together again. So there's a bit of a debate at any time about particular species, but generally speaking, this is all the whales of the world on one slide. To scale as well, so you can see how much they vary in size. And this is a slide, just a quick list of the key features, the key adaptations of cetaceans that enables them to survive and thrive now, again, thank goodness, in the open ocean. So obviously they're adapted for a fully aquatic lifestyle. They have a highly streamlined body shape. All whales, some more streamlined than others, and they swim at different speeds and are adapted for different modes of feeding, but they're all streamlined and they're all relatively fast swimmers. They're all exclusively carnivorous. There are no whales that eat plant material. They might eat some very small animals, but they all eat animals. They propel themselves with an up and down movement of the tail, an adaptation that's very different to fish. And their tail consists of a pair of horizontal flukes. Well, more on that later, because we'll see some flukes during the presentation and some of the photographs. This is another humpback whale. This is a young male, and you can see it spy hopping, rising vertically out of the water. We think this is, in this case, for display purposes rather than to have a look around. It's a way of showing off its fitness. It's a way of communicating with other humpbacks in the area. And this is a behavior that we see fairly frequently in Monterey. And I'll say a bit more about Monterey as we get through a lot more about Monterey as we go through the other slides. So that's what constitutes, that's what these features are, what together make up the specific adaptations of all cetaceans, whether they're baleen whales, whether they're toothed. And this is a sequence that kind of shows, this is a long-beaked common dolphin, and this sequence of photographs was taken again in Monterey. And I included these to show the kind of the dynamism, the streamlined nature, the way in which that almost like a jet propulsion, the power of that two-tail, that double fluke, is able to push them through water and through the air. And as common dolphins in particular are incredibly adept at launching themselves clear of the surface, breaching, as we say, clear of the surface. I think these photos, hopefully anyway, convey some of the dynamism of that animal. And we don't always see these in Monterey Bay, but it's certainly one of the common species that we do see. So, if anyone's thinking this feels a little bit like a school lecture, I will soon get through these slides. I'll just briefly run through these and not take too long. So, the Maestaceti or baleen whales, the ones that everyone kind of thinks of, and I'm me included, when you think of a baleen whale, we things like blue whale and fin whale, minke whales, which is the species that's very common in European waters. They're all rorquals, very generally very big, well, not always like minkies, but very streamlined, very fast. And the fastest whales in the world are rorquals. And of course, the biggest whales in the world are also rorquals. Right whales, 4 species of right whale. They got that name back in the days of whaling when, because, well, for 2 reasons. Firstly, because they tend to stay closer into shore. So for the whalers, they were easier to get to. But most importantly, when they were killed, they floated. Other whale species sink. So for whalers, the right whale to hunt was the one that stayed inshore and floated when they'd killed it. So sad to say, that's where the name right whales comes from. Pygmy right whale, despite the name, is not closely related. And then, of course, grey whale, which is famously very tame in Baja, on the Baja California cruise in the Sea of Cortez. The grey whales are very used to boats and happy to approach boats, and will even bring their young up to greet people on small boats. So, but I'll say a bit more about them later on. So those are the baleen whales. And that's an image that I took in the Azores just this year. And that's a sei whale. We were traveling alongside, not too close. This was as close as we got, and it's because the whale suddenly surfaced much closer than we expected. So we were fairly close to it at this point, but generally we kept a safe distance. We followed it for about 20 minutes, well, rather ran parallel to it for about 20 minutes. And it was moving at about 30 kilometers an hour. So it was as much as we could do to keep up with it, keep alongside it. And you can see there the adaptation, the blowhole, the top of the head, 2 blowholes, always in baleen whales, there are 2. Toothed whales only have 1 blowhole. I'll come back to that. And you can see that muscular back and the long streamlined shape, typical of baleen whales. The toothed whales, a lot more species, many, many more species. All of the oceanic dolphins, the beaked whales, many of which are very obscure, not well known at all, not well studied, and quite mysterious in terms of their distribution and their feeding habits and so on. Porpoises, 7 species of those, and then some lesser known maybe things like dwarf and pygmy sperm whale, and then of course, second from bottom, perhaps arguably along with blue whale, the most famous species of all, sperm whale, which is the main target species on the Azores trip. And Monterey is definitely about, not all about, but the main target is humpback, and again the Azores has a good range of species, but the main target there is the sperm whale. And then finally, river dolphins. I'll say no more about them for now because they don't really feature on the 2 tours I'm going to be concentrating on, but obviously fascinating animals. So, toothed whales. Well, this is arguably, well, along with sperm whale, the most iconic of all the species. This is part of a pod that we saw on the Monterey trip, the second tour, this summer. So they're not the best photographs, but it was a very misty morning. But as the mist cleared, we did manage to get some some photos. But the views, as we stayed with the pod for about 40 minutes, and they were hunting California sea lions. Quite one of the most exciting encounters that I've had on an Naturetrek tour I've had in my life, to be honest. We were able to stay with them, not again keeping a safe distance and not interrupting their hunt, and they carried on regardless. They were quite unconcerned by our presence. But we had some extraordinary views as they raced through the water together, would all dive down together, and then we would see a kind of vertical splash at the surface, and this was where usually either the adult male, who you can see in this photograph, or the adult female would strike a California sea lion, usually from underneath, and hit them hard, stun them, if not kill them outright. And the splash was as the seal's carcass was hitting the surface of the water. So, you know, quite an extraordinary encounter. And 7 whales altogether in the pod. The large male here, the adult female, which I'll say a bit more about, and 2 calves. And you can't see the calves in these shots. I've got a couple of photos later where you can see the calves, one of which was really small. It's interesting to note, though, that despite the male being so much bigger and heavier, it's a matrilineal system for all killer whales everywhere in the world. The female is the dominant animal. She's the leader of the pod. And all the other animals are her offspring, including the large male. So it's very much about a female-driven experience. She's in charge. She decides what they hunt when they hunt. So although the male is the larger and often takes the lead in the hunt, in every other way, it's the adult female who's in charge. And I'll say a bit more about them as we go through, because we'll see 1 or 2 more photos of that particular pod. There are several pods. These are transient killer whales, or big killer whales that are well offshore. When I show you a diagram in a little while of the bay, I'll explain where we tend to see them. But there are several pods that are seen frequently, and they're very well studied, which is good. And so we know quite a lot about the individual pods and their histories and so on. So I'll say a bit more about that in a few slides' time. But very exciting encounter, and I think for everybody on that particular tour, it was the highlight of the tour. So the 2 places we're going to talk about, and my 2 favourite whale watching destinations. We go to several places to see whales, but these are perhaps arguably the best, or certainly 2 of the best in places in the world. The Yellow Arrow, forgive my, the arrows are very big and a bit, it's a rough approximation of the location. So the Yellow Arrow is pointing at the Azores, and the Red Arrow, you'll probably have guessed, is pointing at Monterey Bay on the Pacific coast of the United States. In terms of distributions, although I said the main target, the whale we see most of is humpback in Monterey, and it's sperm whale in the Azores. Actually, both those whales have very wide global distributions, as many species do. They're limited more by latitude and more by latitude than longitude, and their distributions are really limited only really by water temperature and where it's best to feed and where it's best to breed. So both those species can be seen in many places around the world. It's just that some of the best places to get close views and prolonged views are the Azores and Monterey. So I'm going to focus in now on our Monterey Bay tour, and I'll move away a little bit from the science and talk more about the personal experience of being close to these animals. This is Fisherman's Wharf, where we set off on our boat trips when we're in Monterey. We spend a week in Monterey. We stay in the Carmel Valley in a lovely motel, about half an hour out of Monterey itself. A really nice location in its own right, but it means we can get into Monterey onto the boats after breakfast to have a fairly relaxed start to the day. First boat goes out at 9 a.m. And we do both morning and afternoon trips. We do 5 boat trips in a week. So as you can imagine, it takes up the bulk of our time. We do have 2 land-based days. I'll say a bit more about those in a few minutes, but the focus is very much on boat trips. That's what we're there for. We're there to see whales. There's a lot of interesting mammals and birds on land, but it's the whales that everyone's come to see, and that's what we focus on. The boat you can see to the right-hand side of the image is one of the boats that we go out on. That's the sort of, I'll show you a slide now, give you a bit more detail on that. But that's the sort of size of the boat, the boats that we use. So here we are on the west coast of the USA. And if you're not sure, that's where Monterey Bay is. It's sort of 2/3 of the way up from Los Angeles to San Francisco. We fly into San Francisco. And in terms of travel times, it's anything from 2 to 3 hours, depending on traffic, from San Francisco Airport down to Monterey. And we don't go much further south than Monterey. We do go a little further south, but we spend our time pretty close. There's not too much driving, pretty close to Monterey. And there's a zoomed in version of that. You can see more clearly where we are. And then this shows you why Monterey Bay is so good for cetaceans. It really is. So you've got this very deep canyon. If you look at the blue topographical seabed to the left of this image, you can see that deep canyon snaking in from way, way out in the Pacific. And then a finger of that canyon stretches all the way into a place called Moss Landing. And the anvil-shaped bay, we cover every kind of, well, we can cover every square kilometer of that bay, all the way from Monterey down the south up towards Santa Cruz in the north. But generally, we spend our time, a lot of time, almost all our time actually, on the edge of that deep water canyon, because that's where the whales are. And the reason they're there is because the deep water canyon has very cold water. The shallower waters of the bay are much warmer. So what happens is you get what we call a cold water upwelling. The cold water surges up into the warmer, up towards the upper areas where the water is shallower and warmer. And that cold water upwelling brings with it a lot of nutrients. So there's a lot of algae blooming, which in turn feeds zooplankton, and that's what the fish and the krill and other smaller vertebrates eat and feed on. So if you've got this huge surge of nutrients coming up from the deep canyon onto the surface, towards the surface, and in turn you have huge shoals of fish, shoals that can number. I mean, I don't think anyone's entirely whether they've ever been able to put an exact figure on it, but shoals that certainly number in the hundreds of thousands, possibly even millions. And the main fish that the humpbacks are feeding on when they're in Monterey Bay is anchovy, or as the Americans like to say, anchovy. And that's the main prey, and they are looking for those big shoals, and they will feed together, working in small groups, sometimes in much larger groups, and work together to corral the anchovies, to force them into a tight shoal, or even preferably a ball, into which they can then lunge with their mouths open and capture the anchovies. So that's what makes Monterey Bay so good for a range of whales, but particularly humpbacks. They love to feed here. Now they spend their time, I'll put a map up in a minute on migration. They're only here to feed. They don't breed in Monterey Bay, but they need to feed, and they need to feed on vast numbers of fish. They consume a huge tonnage of fish in the time that they're in Monterey Bay. But I'll say a little bit more about that on the next slide. Of course, other cetaceans, all the dolphin species that we see in Monterey Bay, also feeding on the anchovies, and it can be other fish as well. It can be sardines, which is what Monterey was famous for back in the day when it had a sardine cannery. But it's mainly the main food source is definitely the anchovies. We work mainly with Discovery Whale Watch, and I just thought I'd include this from their website because it gives you an idea of the size of the craft, the number of passengers they can fit on. So the biggest boat takes 50 whale watchers, and the smallest of the three takes 35. There is another boat, but we don't often go on that. So they're not huge boats, but they're plenty big enough. They're 50, 60 feet long. They're comfortable in a swell. They don't roll around too much. But the main thing is there's lots of deck space, lots of room to move around so that everybody on the boat can get a view. One of the things they always say at the beginning of the trip is, don't ask us where to sit. It doesn't matter where you sit, because we'll make sure that we line the boats up so that everyone gets a chance. And that's exactly what they do. And one of the reasons I love working with them is they're so adept at ensuring that they maneuver close enough for everyone to get a good view. They'll angle the boat in such a way that people can move left or right. They're constantly talking to you and explaining to you where to stand. It makes my job a lot easier, but crucially, it means that everybody can just relax and enjoy the whales because they know that, they know which side to go on, and they know that if it isn't quite right or they can't get the view they want, they know the skipper will change and move the boat around and make sure that they do. So they're a very professional outfit. Skippers are excellent, very experienced. Onboard naturalists, they've all become friends of mine over the last few years, and they're all, again, very knowledgeable, very friendly, very good at their job. So we have a really solid partnership with them. Works very well. And those are the boats that we use. And you can see they get very close to the whales, but there's a very stringent code of conduct all the operators in Monterey Bay follow. So the well-being of the whales is paramount and always takes precedence over anything else. So we don't approach too close, we stay away, we don't approach closer than 100 meters. Some of the shots you'll see the whales are clearly closer than that, but that's because we've stopped and they've come closer to us. There are times when the skipper usually keeps the engine running because the vibration of the engine lets the whales know where we are and actually makes them feel more secure because they can understand then, they can position themselves and they know where all the boats are. Because there could be 3 or 4 boats together. It could just be us. There could be 2 or 3 other boats in the area. They need to know where we are. If they come very close, then we will cut the engines for fear of any kind of damage to the whale. But also, we then sit and the whales may come and swim under the boat. That's entirely up to them. But it's at their discretion. We are not going to go too close to them. If they choose to come close to us, great. But we leave it up to them, and we don't approach too close. So the species in Monterey Bay, well, I've talked a lot about humpback whales. I should just give a shout out to James Walsh, who took this wonderful photo on the first tour this summer. Yeah, a lovely photo. James is a very accomplished photographer, and he's nearly as good as me. He's very good photographer. And this is better than anything I got, so I wanted to share his photo. I had a wonderful view of this particular whale breach several times in the space of about 20 minutes. Fantastic. And we had other close whales. The breaching behavior isn't a daily thing at all. It's probably something that we usually see it at some point during the week, but it's not guaranteed by any means. But it's a behavior that we do see on sort of 1 out of 5 boat trips, I would say. Why do they do it? Well, there's lots of arguments around that. So the 2 main ones are they're breaching because they want to communicate. They want to let other whales know, well, probably 2 things. Firstly, it's proof of fitness. They're warming up for proving to if this is a male, proving to females how fit and virile he is. And they carry on, the breaching becomes even more pronounced on breeding grounds. And obviously then that's the primary purpose. The other reason, there are 2 other reasons, perhaps. Communication with other whales. Not to communicate fitness, but to communicate availability of food. Whales, particularly humpbacks, feed better when they're working in groups. So there's a theory that this is a behavior that attracts other whales. And certainly we do see when one whale starts to breach, we see sometimes a chain reaction of other whales breaching, almost as if they're passing a message along. So I suppose that's anecdotal evidence in favor of it being communication. And then some people believe that it's also the function designed to remove parasites. If they get overloaded with barnacles, you can see on this whale's chin, if you like, on the lower jaw, you can see that clump of barnacles. Well, the barnacles do serve a purpose. And again, I'll come back to that. Perhaps we can discuss that at the end if we've time, because it's a bit complicated. But they do serve a purpose, and they're not without their there is some symbiosis to that relationship between the whales and the barnacles, but it can become overloaded. So there's a theory that perhaps when they slap back down onto the surface, they're able to dislodge barnacles, lice, and so on. So that's another theory. So, well, but whatever the reason, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to see. I've seen it as you can imagine, over the years on many occasions, but never fails to leave me feeling absolutely exhilarated and amazed to be in the company of these animals. Quite extraordinary. However, one of the great things about Monterey is diversity, and you can see that list of whales. Well, what I've done here is I haven't listed by any means every species that you can see in Monterey, because that list would go on to about 20 species. I simply thought these are the species that I've seen in the last 3 years. So I just thought I'd leave it at that to give you a flavour of what you can expect to see. Now, obviously, in nature, nothing's guaranteed, and this year we didn't see lots of dolphin species, but the year before we did. But then this year we had amazing orca encounter, we had this breaching humpback. So every year has different highlights and different balance of sightings, but I wanted to give an idea of the kind of diversity of species that can be seen. So over 3 years, all of those species, and most of them multiple times, not just one sighting. So it really is premier, whale watching destination. Just a quick slide. I won't go on about this one too much. I'm worried about overrunning because as anybody who's been on a tour with me will know, I do tend to talk a bit too much sometimes. So I'll try and keep it a bit briefer. You can read those bullet points for yourselves anyway. The name is interesting. It means long wings or giant wings of New England. And that name comes from the flippers, which can be, incredibly, they can be up to 5 meters long, far and away the longest dorsal flippers of any cetacean. And a key feature of humpback whales, enables them to be highly maneuverable. And so it's kind of, fitting that the name comes from their standout feature. The New England reference is, again, an old whaling reference. That's when they were first being captured and caught and studied as part of the New England whaling out of Nantucket. 40 tons is an extraordinary weight, isn't it? And 14 meters long is kind of an average for an adult. I mean, adults can be, I think the longest adult was 60 feet. So it says 46 feet on the diagram, 56 feet on the bullet points. I think 46 feet is the average. But they have been up to 60 feet long, quite incredible. And a good scale there from a diver and an elephant, to give you an idea. Now, they have a very famously complex song, and it was the song of the humpback whale, which was one of the things that inspired the anti-whaling movement, or should I say the pro-whale movement. One of the reasons that we still have humpbacks, because they were hunted down to a very few thousands that were left, along with many other species. And one of the reasons that the pro-whale lobby, that the people that campaigned to save the whale were so successful, was that they were able to play and promote the complex song of the humpback whale as proof of what an extraordinary animal it was, how intelligent it was, and how important it was that we didn't lose them. Given that I'm slightly overrunning, I won't play it now. Maybe we'll have time at the end. We'll see what George thinks. We'll have time to play that at the end. But it is many of you, most of you will be familiar with it. Extraordinary sound. And it's interesting to note that they've actually evolved a specific organ within the skeleton, which enables them to produce those sounds. So they don't need to breathe when they're singing. And they can stay underwater for many, many minutes with sharing their incredible song, which can travel for up to 40 miles. Quite incredible. Just another of the extraordinary features of this animal. These are the migration routes. And you can see to the left of the diagram, the map rather, you can see that the whales in Monterey Bay migrate down to the coast of Mexico, and down to Costa Rica, coast of Costa Rica, but mainly Mexico, and that's where they breed. So they spend their time in Monterey. They arrive around April time, they leave around October, and throughout that time they are feeding and putting on a huge amount of weight. And that's why they come to Monterey Bay, to take advantage of those anchovies and to put on weight. Because when they migrate south, they don't feed at all. So for the entire breeding season, they don't feed, males and females. The males are busy competing for females' attention. The females, of course, busy both mating and then calving. And then they make their way back north with their young after the end of the breeding season, having lost several tons in weight. So quite an extraordinary adaptation, extraordinary migration strategy. And you can see that from this map how widespread humpback whales are around the world. But it is always worth reminding ourselves how we nearly lost this species forever. And what a fantastic job conservation bodies did in publicising that and in making sure that we saved the humpbacks and other species of whale. So here we are, just to show off our amazing sightings. It is an extraordinary tour. It's I've done this tour many times now, and every week it's different, but every week we have these amazing encounters with humpbacks, and we may see Dall's porpoise, and we may see a superpod of common dolphins, and we always see Risso's dolphins and many other species. But it's these close encounters with the humpbacks that really do catch your imagination and make the trips really, for me and for everybody. I think everybody who comes on them tells me that they are unforgettable, and they will live long and well forever in our memories. And it's moments like these. On the left, tail slapping. This is a bizarre behavior again, probably mainly communication. And you can see the reason I chose that particular photo is you can see the arch in the back, and you can see the sort of the joints of the spine where it's making such an effort to arch its back to slap that tail back down. On the right, this is a youngster that repeatedly came up and spy hopped right next to the boat. And that picture I took, it's not cropped at all, and only to get it to make it a bit squarer. And I took that with my lens as wide as I could get it. That's how close that whale was to the boat. We'd stopped the engines and waited, and it just kept coming closer. And you can see those. This is a youngster, so it doesn't have too many barnacles just yet, but you can see those barnacles. Yeah, amazing encounters. The famous breach. I don't think that's as good as James Walsh's shot, but it's one of mine from 2023. And then the double blowhole, it's interesting. So as I said before, toothed whales only have a single blowhole. Baleen whales have a double blowhole. And again, you get a feel for how close encounters that we have with these animals. And then the typical tail shot, the tail fluke, just as the whale's about to dive. A few other species we've seen, top right there, long-beaked common dolphin, which we've already seen that similar photos. The main photo on the left, this is my favourite dolphin anywhere in the world, a Pacific white-sided dolphin, absolutely beautiful animal, and very fast swimmers. And they shot through. We saw them on a couple of different tours that year, and again last year. Didn't see them this year, unfortunately. As I said, it's always different. But yes, beautiful dolphin. And then the bottom right, Risso's dolphin, about which I could do a half-hour presentation all on their own, but I won't do that now. I bet George is probably looking at his watch wondering when I'm going to shut up, so I'll move on. Nonetheless, yeah, Risso's dolphins are beautiful, amazing animals. Deep divers, hunters mainly of squid and octopus. And they always look heavily scarred, as you can see on these animals here, because that'll be both as a result of competing males, but also, and more often actually, as a result of fighting with the squid. And the squids have these hooked tentacles with which they can flay the skin of the Risso's dolphin. So they often have this. The older they get, the paler they get, as their skin is scarred up, fighting with squid in the depths of the ocean. So amazing animals, and we see them, always see them. I don't think we've never had a tour in Monterey where we haven't had a close encounter with a pod of Risso's dolphins. A few more shots of the this year's encounter with the orca or killer whale. You can see how misty it was in the main photo. That whale's again tail slapping, and we think that was just, at that moment, it was just excitement. The hunt was going well. They'd caught their second seal, and there was a bit of a frenzy of tail slapping, and the youngsters were breaching. I didn't manage to catch that, unfortunately, with my camera. Youngsters were breaching out of the water. The top left, you can see one of the calves. And he's in front, in fact, of the adult female. So that's the larger of the two calves. And you can just see the adult female's fin. And then you can see three. I didn't manage to get all 7 in one photo, but 3 together in the other photo. Other marine mammals are available. So we have the famous sea otter, another real feature of Monterey Bay, that stretch of coast. Sea otters are fantastic animals. And we always spend time looking for those on the days when we're not on the boat. We'll spend a lot of time on the coast looking for seabirds, but also looking for these sea otters, fantastic animals. And then, of course, the California sea lion, which is what the orcas were hunting. But the California sea lions occur in these vast rafts of hundreds and hundreds of animals. They hunt commensally with the humpbacks. So very often, groups of feeding humpbacks are accompanied by these huge rafts of hundreds of California sea lions, which will spend weeks out at sea without returning to land, hunting the same anchovies and effectively using the humpbacks and feeding off their activity gives them an opportunity to get in there and catch some anchovy themselves. And so onto the Azores. This is a picture I took on a ferry from Faial, where the plane lands, across to Pico on the Azores. We fly via Lisbon. The Azores are Portuguese territory, and a small group of islands right out, 1,400 miles out from the European mainland, so right out in the middle of the ocean. And Pico is famous for being, was famous for its whale watching. It's also famous for its mountain. Pico is a volcano, dormant but not extinct, and a volcano. It's the highest mountain in Portugal, if you count the Azores as part of Portugal. A beautiful place, a fascinating place in its own right. But again, we're there to do lots and lots of boat trips. So the reason the Azores are so good is because they are right out there in the middle of the ocean. And of course, being volcanic islands, they have very steep sides, and you get the same cold water upwelling effect on the rocky shores of the Azores as you do in Monterey Bay. And here you can see, I hope you can see where Pico sits in the Azores, pretty much in the middle, very close to Faial, which is, as I said, the plane lands in Faial. Just a 30-40-minute ferry crossing. We work with a company called CW Azores, who are excellent whale watching and also diving. They're also run a lot of diving trips. These are generally 3-hour trips, but very different to Monterey, because here we're on ribs, and a very different experience. Very low to the water, obviously, very fast. You haven't got as much wriggle room. You're not really. We do get to stand up a little bit and stretch our legs, but essentially you are in your seat, and you can't move around the boat the way that you can in Monterey. But the boats are so small that it doesn't really matter, and they're very manoeuvrable. So the skippers are excellent again at positioning, not getting too close, but close enough, and they'll manoeuvre around the whales to give everybody a really good look. And this is the main attraction, the sperm whale. Amazing animals, and very hard compared to humpbacks to photograph, but I did my best. So this gives you an idea of the close views we get. This is an adult female surfacing. You notice the single blowhole on top of the head, it's offset to the left, and it's pretty sure it's the only whale that has an offset blowhole. So they're easy to identify from the blow, because the blow comes out angled to the left. But lots of other species, and I've only done this trip this year, and as you'll see, 7 species of cetacean in 1 week is a pretty extraordinary return. And honestly, hand on heart, amazing views of all of those animals. I mean, none of them were brief and none of them were distant. Fantastic. More sperm whales than anything else, but lots of dolphins, lots and lots of dolphins. And the bonus of a sei whale as well was fantastic. Sperm whales are a completely different animal in terms of how they feed to a humpback. And you can see here the classic shape of Moby Dick, which of course is what that famous book is all about, a white albino sperm whale. Interestingly, sperm whales hunt entirely through sonar. They do have eyesight, but they're hunting in the depths down to 2 kilometers, and they're hunting mainly giant squid. So a similar hunting strategy to the Risso's dolphin, but these are massive squid, and they can dive for, generally it's 40 to 45 minutes, but they can have been recorded diving for well over an hour, and will get to depths of 2 kilometers. And this lower jaw, there are no teeth in the upper jaw, all the teeth are in the lower jaw. The upper jaw just has sunken vestigial teeth, but they're mainly just act as sockets for the lower jaw teeth. Amazing animals, incredible abilities to dive deep, to dive long, and that enormous head full of spermaceti, which plays a key role in enabling them to dive quickly and to surface without suffering from, as we would, from decompression as they rise up through the water. Very small flippers, they don't need them. The power comes from the tail, that incredibly robust tail, very muscular. And again, you can see very similar in size to humpbacks. Males are much bigger than females and get up to a similar tonnage as the humpback, similar length. In the Azores, at this time of year, the time of year that we're there, sorry, in the summer, spring and summer, early autumn, it's females. The males have gone much further north to feed. So we see what we're watching are females, young males, and calves, not the big males. But the females nonetheless, 36 feet and 15 tons, are not small. And again, they sing, they also sing, not as famous as humpbacks for singing, but they do. But they use echolocation to locate their prey at depths when there is no light, they can't see anything. And in fact, the sperm whales click, which they use, which obviously then resonates back and is picked up by a special cells within their head, organ within their head rather. That click is the loudest animal noise on Earth. It's 290 decibels. Yeah, and can travel for over 1,000 miles. Can be heard rather over 1,000 miles. Obviously, they're not hunting at those distances. Yeah, extraordinary, quite an extraordinary animal. Very hard to photograph. I did manage to catch, sort of anyway, this breach. It's a shame that it breached away from us, not towards us, but there you go. But again, I hope it gives you an idea of just about how close we get to these animals. And this was a little way away. I had to crop this down a bit, but maybe 400 meters away from us. And it breached 3 times in a row. Amazing sight. Fantastic. And when you're that low to the water, there's a real immediacy and a real sense of close contact. Brilliant. Just some quick photos. This top left, a sperm whale breathing out, exhaling as it surfaces. This again, these are short-beaked common dolphins, but you can see how close they were to the boat, just disappearing away from us. There's the other 2 photos. And then one surfacing right next to us. Short-finned pilot whales. Amazing. Again, very different shape, very different feel to them when you meet them. They swim slowly. They're quite easier to photograph, although they don't breach much. This is kind of as much as you see of them. But really interesting animals. Can occur in big pods around the Azores. I've got lots more to say, but I'm aware that time is running on. So I hope if there are any questions, I'm sure we've got some time left to deal with those. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I have a friend who does lots of presentations, works for the Wildlife and Wetlands Trust, and I was talking to him about doing this, and he said, what you need to do, he said, don't worry about exciting your audience, just show them how excited you get, and then they'll understand what it's like to be there. So I hope I've been able to do that, because I'm genuinely never less than excited, and usually wildly enthusiastic when I'm around cetaceans. And I think the 2 tours, Azores and Monterey, are outstanding tours. So if you haven't been, please come, and if you have been, please come back.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Marcus. That was absolutely wonderful. Really, really inspiring. Again, as well to me, a fellow whale watching enthusiast and just cetacean enthusiast, full stop. It's always great to hear all this stuff. And yeah, really, really enjoyed it. So we've had one question, which I guess is more of a request really at this stage, which is to please do play the whale songs from Andrew Burke. So if you'd be happy to do that, then I'm sure it'd be very much appreciated. And then as well, Andrew, to answer your question, are there any extension options or complimentary tours available with the Azores and Baja, California trips? So yes and no to answer that. For extensions for those, we've arranged happily additional nights and additional whale watching trips for extra days in both the Azores and Baja as well. So for Baja specifically, we quite often have guests staying on for a few nights in San Jose del Cabo, which is at the tip of the peninsula, and also in San Diego as well. And for the Azores as well, we've arranged additional nights into both Lisbon, into Portugal's capital, and with a few days exploring the city, as well as additional nights in Pico or San Miguel, where we run our trips to enjoy some extra whale watching trips. And then secondly, as well, to answer the question that's just come through, so what is the birding like in the Azores? So it's relatively limited in terms of species diversity. What I will say, which is absolutely spectacular in the Azores, is the sheer number of Cory's shearwaters that you will see on the water. And I can see Marcus nodding in the top corner as well. So it's absolutely wonderful numbers out on the water there. I was lucky enough to lead our Great Whales of the Azores trip there back in May. And thoroughly enjoyed both the whale action on the water, but also just the absolute number of seabirds that you see. And Marcus, if you want to touch on that a little bit more as well, you're more than welcome.
Yeah, I will. I mean, I was just queuing up the the humpback whale, but I'll whiz back to show you a quick picture. So, yes, George is absolutely right. The birding on the Azores, Pico in particular, is quite limited, but the Azores that play host to the bulk of the world's Cory's population. And one evening we go out with one of the local guides, and we go to the Cory's breeding site, and we wait until it's almost black. I have to wait really until about 10 in the evening. well after sundown, and then they start to come in, they start to fly in, extraordinary whizzing, so close they can brush you with their wingtips, and they're calling this extraordinary kind of gurgling frog-like call all the time. Really evocative, brilliant. So that's something we do on the tour. But I was just going to whiz through to a couple of photos. So this is Monterey birds, which isn't what I want. Oh, I think I might have deleted it. I'm sorry. Anyway, that's the photo. That's an example of a couple of Corys coming really close to the boat. I've got frame filling shots. They're all around us, and they are beautiful birds, incredibly aerodynamic, incredibly acrobatic even. And as I say, it's the best place in the world to see them. So other birds, for example, there are Azorian specialities, endemics, in fact. I did have a slide, but I've got rid of it because I knew we wouldn't have time. Azores chaffinch, which is an endemic. So there's those kinds of birds. And there's a few other bits and bobs, but I would say it's the seabirds that steal the show. And actually it's the same in Monterey as well. Seabirds and shorebirds.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Marcus. So I'll let you get that audio back up and ready to
It's
go.
back, sorry.
No, that's okay. And then final question as well I've got here from Diana Lambert. Where else are we doing whale watching? So for these trips, the whale watching, like I said, it covered is from both Monterey and from the island of Pico. We also offer a separate spring departure to both Pico and San Miguel, which is timed for the great whale migration. So as the blue fin and sei whales migrate through the warm waters on their way up to colder temperatures, they'll stay in the Azores for a few days to a few weeks to feed in late April to mid-May, and then continue their journey further north. Other whale watching trips that we offer are to obviously Baja, California. That's one of our more famous ones. We have a number of tours to Iceland, which incorporate whale watching into some wider exploration of the country, as well to Norway to visit the orca as they follow the herring into the fjords in the winter as well. They're just a few of our main whale watching itineraries, but we have a vast number of whale watching trips, far too many for me to Rolodex off the top of my head. And if you want to have a look at those, I'd really recommend just having a look through our whale watching tab on our website. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us at info@naturetrek.co.uk, and we'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay. I echo George's words on Iceland. I've led all the Iceland trips over the years, and love them. I'm going back again in the spring. I'm looking forward to it. The whale watching can be fantastic. It's not as full on. That's not the main focus, not the only focus. It's a different kind of tours. Tours that to visit the whole country mainly and to see lots of other things. But yeah, excellent whale watching. I was there in March and we had a pod of 16 orca all around the boat, so it can be fantastic. Usually fantastic, in fact. Iceland is, if you haven't been there, well worth a visit. Right, shall I play that song, George, now and see if I can get this to work?
I think please do.
You may not see it, but I hope you'll hear it, because there's a sonogram that goes with it. But the main thing is the wonderful sound.
Hang on there, Marcus. I think you've muted the video there slightly. If you go back in.
Can we hear anything?
No, if you go, I think you've got the clip muted. If you go, there we go.
Is it coming through?
It is, yes. If you want to give the clip a replay as well.
I will.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Marcus. It's absolutely fantastic to be able to hear that call. And then we've got a couple of further questions here. One from Andrew Burke, which is, do you get fees or Xenos petrol and similar? Marcus, I'm going to let you handle that. They're not names that I recognize from seeing on the on our Azores trip. So I'm assuming it's probably Monterey. But like I said, I'll let you answer that one.
Well, the short answer is no. I mean, I'd love to say yes, but yeah, it's possible to see phayas in the Azores, but it's not easy from a whale watching boat. And if we had more time to do sea watching, then we probably would pick them up. But it's not often. I mean, I never say never, but it's unlikely. I would have to say. But it is possible. In Monterey, the main birds of interest, seabird-wise, are black-footed albatross, and then we have obviously shearwaters, sooty shearwaters, not many, up to 500,000, and then also pink-footed shearwater, black storm petrel, ashy storm petrel, Casson's murrelet, rhinoceros auklet. So Monterey in particular has a range of seabirds. Phayas would be I could only really put it down as an outside chance on the Azores.
Brilliant. And then the next question that I can see is from Glenn Tyler, which is, are the northern and southern feeding populations of humpback whale genetically distinct? And if so, do they show any morphological differences? So I'm happy to answer this one, but also Marcus, if you want to cover it. So yeah, short answer is yes. So they feed on very different things. So the southern hemisphere populations will feed almost exclusively on krill. They also do show some slight morphological differences as well. They have different colorations on their body, different sizes, and different feeding behaviors as well. But if Marcus, if you want to go into any further detail on that, then please do.
No, brilliant, George. No, I was just going to mention this interesting phenomenon is that the animals that migrate from Mexico, some of them Monterey, some come to Monterey, some go to Alaska, and when they're in Alaska, they're in close proximity with the humpbacks that migrate from Hawaii. But it's interesting that the Hawaiian-Alaskan migration route, very few animals swap. Almost all the animals that go from Mexico to Alaska go back to Mexico. There's very, very little movement between those two populations, which it has happened, but it's very unusual. And there's a theory that perhaps they too will become more genetically distinct, those two populations, even though they're wintering in the same area.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Marcus. I just want to do a quick shout out for any more questions. Now's your time to ask. Give a few seconds here for everyone to comment them if you have any. Well, so I'm not seeing anything else come in. So I think we're all okay to finish here. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining. It's always wonderful to host these things, and I really hope it has inspired you to think about some of your future travel destinations, and to give whale watching a consideration if you haven't already. Our next one of these will be on the 10th of November, and this will be hosted by my colleague Chris, who will be talking about Fair Isle, one of the absolutely fantastic bird migration hotspots in the UK. As well as our upcoming Naturetrek Great British Bird Race, which is starting in January, in the last weekend of January, as part of our 40th anniversary next year. So if you want to come along and listen to that, please do. That'll be on Monday, the 10th of November, starting at 7:30 in the evening. And if you want to sign up, the link can be found on our website as well, and we'll do a number of calls out on social media as we get closer to the time as well. And thank you again, everyone, for joining. It's been a pleasure to host this with you, Marcus, and really, really informative, and really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone. Thank you.